Hello, everybody, and welcome to this session where you get to meet one of your instructors. So, I'm Anik, a co founder of Edist. You've seen me many times, but with us on this video is Devang Sharma, one of the instructors for our Algorithms and Data Structures Bootcamp, and much, much more. So, hey, hi, welcome Devang to this video that we're doing.
Yeah, hi Anik, thanks for inviting me.
And yeah, Devang, if you could just introduce yourself and tell everybody about yourself over here.
Yeah, sure. Hey everyone, thanks Anik for the introduction. I'm Devang Sharma. I'm a senior software development engineer at Cisco. I'm part of the security business group here, and I'm glad to be associated with Edist for a couple of months now. And I've been teaching algorithm analysis and data structure course. So yeah, pretty much good journey here. A lot of good people, students that I'm finding here. It's really good.
Right, and we are very glad to have you, Devang. A lot of good reviews from students about you, about the way you teach, and yeah. So try to talk about today is we get a lot of questions from students, right, about cracking product-based companies, being attending software companies, and so on. So first things first is if you could tell a little bit. I know you're in the security domain, you can't tell a lot, but just a little bit. Like if somebody were to join, let's say your team, or was to join your company, what are the kind of problems they will be solving?
Okay. So if I talk about Cisco, they are actually market leaders in networking, and around 7 or 8 years ago, they entered into security domain. Cisco is primarily a networking company, but for past 8 to 9 years, I would say we have been excelling in security, and now reaching in 2019 to 2021, we have reached actually the market leader with more than 50% of the market share in the security domain as well. And as a matter of fact, I'm part of the security business group, right? SBG group, we call it. So this SBG group is one of the most performing assets for Cisco overall. So the sales that we are generating, the revenue that we are generating, it's not just primarily from the networking devices like routers and switches, which happen to be in previous couple of decades that Cisco has grown through, but it's also from the security domain networking. The work is good, as you have said. I cannot disclose much about it because cybersecurity is a very contingent space. But in that being said, the kind of problem space that we are solving, it's really amazing, and they are very large scale. The reason, if you see, like the impact of customers we have, the impact we have, and among this pandemic, as you see, right, the security attacks have actually grown many folds. It's actually a fact. You see in the news, like companies like Facebook and Zomato and Domino's, everything you see, like the data is being breached and all. Let me just tell you, had it not been a Cisco, it's only 99% of the attacks has been already filtered out. And it has not been a Cisco, you would have been seeing 100 faults of them. So the problem space is good. The kind of work that we are doing is really amazing, and it's very customer centered.
Nice. That's good to know. And there's a huge hype around product-based companies, and I keep telling students about what are the it's a brilliant sort of problems that people try to solve. Yeah. But is that hype real? You are working at a product-based company. Is that hype real? And what are some things about a product-based company that make it stand out so much?
To be very honest, the one thing that I appreciate about all the product-based companies, well, first of all, I cannot differentiate a company, right? I believe all the companies are good. They are different into the different segments. Somebody is a market leader in the e-commerce, somebody in the food delivery, somebody in the ed tech, somebody solving some different problem space and so on. Somebody in marketing and networking and fintech companies we have, right? The thing that I like is you actually love to solve and make an impact. That's the most important thing that you see, right? When you see a customer, right, the best thing that I feel about a product-based company is the kind of impact you get for the customers, right? You actually know the impact that you are driving, and that sense you get. It's not like you are just working there and you don't feel the impact out of it. You feel the impact immediately. Your action, you rolled out a feature and you got a customer feedback. If it's a good feature, it's a good feedback. If it's a bad feature, it's a bad feedback, depending on the feature you develop, right? But that's the one thing that I really feel good about product-based innovation. The learning is immense, and more important than the learning is the kind of value that you are generating. You actually get to see the value immediately in your products. So that's one thing I like about product-based companies.
And in our earlier conversations, you had mentioned about the people also. Can you tell us about like the culture and people, not just at your company, but at other companies as well?
Yeah. Okay. I'll keep it very short and brief, and to be very honest, this is a culture that I have seen in all good organizations. I will not be very specific to Cisco or some other organization. I will be specific to all the organizations that I've seen. People here are actually very uplifting, right? And it's not like there's a hierarchy or something. It's open culture. It's not like, hey, I'm a manager, so I'm not supposed to tell you this, or I'm a senior VP here, I cannot do this. You can approach anybody at any time, at any spot. Even on the weekends, on Sundays, we have meetings. If somebody is facing a problem, we can solve it. That's the one thing about the work culture. Second thing about the work culture, as I said, people are uplifting here, right? They always push you better. Like if you're facing problem with something and you want to explore more problem spaces or more domain spaces. For example, you get a project and you are not enjoying that much, right? It feels like you can contribute much more. So you can directly go ahead and ask with your direct mentor or manager, like, this is the problem space I want to explore into, and this I want deeper into. I will be the right fit for it. They are very open to it. They are not like very rigid for it. They are very flexible in that space. That's the second thing. And third and the most important thing is eagerness to learn, right? Even if I see people here with 20, 22 years of experience, right? To be honest, 20 years of experience is way, way too much, right? I am almost 22, right? And they have experience of more than my age. And I still see these people, they are so eager to learn. I mean, in our span of 20 years, right? I don't think there is any problem in the technological domain that you have not seen or you have not seen. It's a very big span of time, right? 20 years. You've seen almost all the conditions
Yes.
of the market, all the customer behaviors, all the technological products, its outcomes, revenue growth, everything you have seen. But still, they are so hunger to learn. They are so eager to learn. That's something really amazes me as well, and I take inspiration from that in that work culture. So I think that's three things that I really love about this work culture.
Yeah, that's consistent with everybody. I say, like, no matter how senior you get, you still want to
Yeah.
learn, because
Yeah.
you may have a better way of doing something, and or just know your perspective. That's great. So
Yeah.
you see that you have this great organization, and we'll come into the companies you've cracked and so on. You cracked so many companies. You're working at a brilliant problem space.
Yeah.
A question arises in some of our students. So if you're doing all of that, why do you want to teach? Like, you're teaching with Edist, you're teaching algos, data structures, and not only with us, you're mentoring in a lot of other different varieties as well.
Yeah.
Even before us, you used to mentor a lot of students. Why do you want to even do that?
That's actually a very good question. And to be very honest, there are two main reasons for it. The first reason is I do not hail from a software engineering background, and to be honest, I didn't expect myself to be in the software engineering problem space in the first part. My aim was to join the army and join the paraspecial forces, to be very precise, and serve there because I hail from a military background and past 3 generations have served in the army. So I was born for in that background, so I decided to approach the same. But somehow the things turned out for good or for bad. I don't know. But till now, I feel that's for good. Let's see for the future time. So this is one thing. When I was there, right, I had nobody to teach me. I had nobody to something to look forward to. So what I did was in the second semester itself, I started exploring. I started exploring internships and one thing to other, second to third, and things keep leading up, right? Things keep opening up. But I do feel that if I have some specific path or somebody to who have guided me at that time, I think it would have been easier. Well, there is no, I am not complaining anything, but yeah, things would have been easier. But one or the other way, the journey has been very inspiring. The journey has been very learning for me. But I believe that if somebody would have been there at that time, it would have made my path easier and to relate the dots, right? I have to figure out the dots. If somebody haven't got as I would be able to connect the dots instead of figuring it out. So that's the one reason. If I couldn't find a mentor, maybe I can become for someone who is not coming from that knowledge space. Because not everybody comes from a software engineering family. They're very diverse backgrounds, right? And just because you are not from a software engineering background doesn't mean that you cannot be into the software engineering domain, right? It's all about your interest. It's all about how deep you want to be, how hungry you are for it. If you're good for it, doesn't matter which domain you are. I've seen people who come from law, who come from arts. They are in really, really good software engineers. They are very senior politicians like vice president and senior vice president. So it's nothing stopping you, right? That's the one thing. And second thing, and the most important thing here is that I believe that the education culture that we have in India, right, the kind of culture that we are developing here, it really needs to change. This really needs to change. On that part, I will say two things. First is the things that we are taught in college and things that are expected in a company. These are way, way different. There's a big difference between the theoretical knowledge that are being taught in the college, in the curriculum. I'm not specific to any college, all the colleges in India, right? It's not about a behavioral learning or the skill-based learning. It's more about the kind of, okay, you read the questions, you do the assignments, you get the marks and all. That is not something expected. This is 21st century. People expect you to be good at problem-solving skills, and that is not something you gain out of the books. That is something you actually gain out of hands-on experience. You take the real-life projects, right? That's one thing. And second thing is the criteria that we have divided in the college, right? You see, we have divided into tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 colleges. So for those who are reading in tier 1, tier 2, like IITs, NITs, and triple IITs, it's fairly easy. I'm not saying they get advantage, but it's fairly easy for them to get multiple options. So even if they don't get into one of the two companies, they will either get up in a very good company because all the options are good, right? But for one who's coming from a tier 3 or tier 4 college, who's failing from that, right, and reaching to that point, I think that's something really big for them. And I want to be very honest, right? I have taught people who come from tier 4 college and they crack their highest offer in the decades. Till now, they have the highest offer from that colleges. So the kind of satisfaction that gives me, like I have a friend like who I've taught, his name is Madhav. So he was one of the highest scorer in his college. And none of them in his college even knew about that, okay, this is a college or this is where. So he found out from my LinkedIn profile, he approached me. It went for 3 or 4 months of mentorship course, and then he cracked it. And now he's the highest placement score. And he has become as a source of inspiration to others. So that kind of thing actually motivates me, right? If you can believe it, right, I can do it. You just need the right path for it. And I want to be the someone who can give the right path to somebody. Even if I'm able to impact one life, I believe that can be source for multiple lives.
That's very inspiring, Devang. Really, and that's exactly what we are also trying to do. And I think like hats off to all the software engineers who want to come back and help the nation. I mean, there's one thing, and everybody has their own right, but you could have just been working in a software, but coming back and giving to the youth, especially knowing that the system is not good. That's really inspiring. So thanks for that. We'll shift gears a little bit, and we just want to understand a little bit about your placement journey. So I already know, but I think a lot of students will really benefit from knowing what are the kind of companies you've cracked, what are the offers you've got, and what are some memorable experiences. I don't think we can go through all the experiences, but the memorable experiences at least.
Okay. So I will divide into 2 phases. First is before graduation and second is after graduation, because the roles were different, right? So before graduation, it's for L3 or ST1 roles, or you can say entry-level developers or junior developer roles. So I gave a total of 63 interviews and I got offers from 25 of them. And of those 25, 22 were in India and 3 were international offers. I won't name all the companies here. It will be like we will be traveling on all for 25, right? And then after graduation, I have given 8 interviews, and out of those 8 interviews, I have got offers from 6 of them. So 2 companies I was not able to crack. So 6 offers I have got out of it. So these are for senior roles, senior developers roles, SD2 and SD3, or L4 you can say if you're comparing what Netflix and Google. Talking about my companies, as I said, I believe that all companies are good. There is no bad company for sure, right? So I have cracked the offers from the market leaders in fintech. I've cracked the offer from market leader in products and services like Google and Netflix. Then I have from video streaming services. Then food tech, ed tech, food delivery services, ed tech services. Almost all the domains. Networking I'm currently working in. Security I'm working currently. So almost all the domains have. Then we have these social media platforms. So almost all the organizations that have been the market leader, I got the opportunity to interview them and get with the offers. Talking about the memorable experience, well, to be very honest, either you crack an interview or you don't crack an interview. Ultimately, you learn something out of it. So there has been memorable for every interview has been memorable. Either even it doesn't matter. It's not like I was able to solve all the questions there. Sometimes I was, sometimes I wasn't, right? But there's always something that I learn out of it. If I talk about one memorable experience, I would say it's about Facebook I had in 2020, and recently I had with Netflix. So the kind of questions they ask, right? These are not the questions that you can even think of, or you can just ask somebody who has interviewed previously, because they're always new. They're always new. It's not nothing related like they have a specific set of questions in their mind. The interviewer will come and he will start talking to you like a friend, right? Okay, this is what you're doing, this is what you're doing, and out of whatever you are speaking, they will make the problem statement. So you understand this, right? You will not even realize the problem is a DP or a greedy or something. There is nothing like a fixed pattern like that. He will be talking just to a friend, and out of whatever you are speaking, he will convert it into a problem space and give it to you solve. And then later you feel, okay, this is actually a algorithm problem that he has made out of my words. So you are understanding, right? Problem making is also an art. Problem setting is also an art. If you're talking to someone and then making it align the dots with a problem statement and then asking the other person to solve, it requires a very in-depth knowledge of data structure, system design, trade-offs, and the kind of products that you're delivering. So that is something that I really love about it. For a moment, I didn't even feel like I'm an interviewer. I felt like I'm actually talking to my friend and we're just having a discussion on a particular software. So yeah, that was one of the most memorable moments, I would say.
That's nice. That's really cool. So you've prepared, and I think you've almost cracked all the companies as you mentioned, right? Or at least market leaders in all the segments. Now coming to from a student perspective, right? So somebody who's right now probably going to graduate in 2021, 2022, or probably is just starting off the software journey, right?
Sure.
Right. There's a huge thing about I need to be really good at competitive programming. I need to be. And in fact, that's the only thing I need to be good at. Like a lot of people think that I just, every day, week in, week out, I'm just on Code Forces or I'm just on CodeChef or HackerRank, whichever you pick up one of them. And as long as I'm, killing it on that, I'm really doing well on that, my product company is guaranteed, right? So this is one such, attitude I find among students. What are some other things that you find and you think that probably students are getting wrong in their placement prep?
One thing I would like to exclusively disclose here, that if the attitude is like, I know computer programming, my product-based company is confirmed, let me break it to you guys, nothing like that. And you are not going to do competitive programming when you join a job, right? You will not be working on competitive programming. You will not be working on CodeChef or HackerRank or LeetCode or any other platforms, right? What we look for is a problem solving, right? And for a fresher role, when we say about problem solving, we expect them to be good at data structure and algorithms because these are the very basic things. You cannot expect a fresh grad or intern to be very good at system design. Ultimately, we will be working in systems. We will be working large distributed microservices. But I do not expect from a fresher because of the curriculum also. I'm not only blaming the company, I'm blaming the curriculum as well because they are not taught like this, right? But DSL was something that we expect. Okay, they have taught and they would have practiced. So that is one thing that we can assess on. But also, I agree that this part also needs to be amended, right? Because there are many people. It's not just that you can assess anybody on DSL if they're not good with problem solving things. So that is one thing. Doing competitive programming does not guarantee your selection in product-based company. Second thing, I'm not undermining the importance of competitive programming. Like I am a competitive programmer, have 3.5 years of experience. Still, I do competitive programming, and I have seen people who are like you see Adichito and Janet Tokovic, right? They're so senior, but they still do competitive programming. It's like a fun. So if you're doing something out of your hobby, out of your interest, passion, I respect it. It's really amazing. But if you are taking it as a wild card to be selected in a product-based company, no, that's not how it works. You need to be good at problem solving, and then I say problem solving are divided. Okay, on a junior stage, we don't have anything else. We have only data structure and algorithm. But even if you're really good with data structure and algorithm, you don't need to that level of competitive programming. But you're very good in thinking of new problem spaces. For example, if I give you just condition to design any, let's say for example, if I ask you to design Instagram, right? And if you're able to think the design, okay, this is the features I need, this is the non-functional features I need, and this is what I can extend to make the user more effective. Again, the product-based company is all about this thing. The more you make a product easier for the customer, the better developer you become, and the more are your chances of an organization. So don't just follow the buzzwords like competitive programming or this XYZ tech stack. It's all about stick to the basics, be very thorough with it, know the algorithms, know the data structure, and practice as much as you can. Try to solve problems instead of memorizing the solution. That's one thing I would recommend to all the juniors who are watching it.
That's brilliant. And one of the things I also like to advise students on is starting to look at topics and build mental models for those topics, right? So
Yep.
for example, what I found is, and competitive programming helps with this. So that's what, it's not that you don't need competitive programming, it definitely helps.
Yes.
But
Yes.
one of the things that students, especially newcomers, what they do is they look up about 100 tutorials on YouTube, and with every tutorial, right, you picking up something new and something different, right? But that mental model is not being able to form right away. Like for example, if you look at a bit manipulation question, or we'll get to DP and graphs and all of those things, each one of these, if you can, 90% of the problems can be broken down into like some sub problems as well, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's definitely, a company is not going to ask a repeated question right away, but they are going to ask you something that's based on that mental model. So if you have some known techniques with you, it's like it's like a recipe. You have the ingredients, right? And then the restaurant will ask you to cook something different that day, but at least you need to know how to use the ingredients, you need to know how to use the tools.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So yeah,
Just to add to your one point, I would like to mention one thing. Whenever you solve problem on any of the platforms that you're solving, be it Adist or LeetCode or anything, right? Try to solve in multiple approaches. You see, you will get time complexity and space complexity. Like on LeetCode, I know like you get, okay, this is how much your solution beat 100% of solutions. Try to come up with multiple approaches. Not like, okay, I know the most optimized approach, I will go in the interview, I will write the most optimized approach, I will get selected. No, that is not what we are looking for. What you are looking for is there will always be a problem that you have not seen. Be very assured of it. You have not seen that problem. What you expect is, how do you think? What is your thought process? Are you come up with the brute force first? That's the most basic thing, right? Brute force. And then how do you optimize it? Do you think about the constraints of time? Do you think about the constraint of space? And then comes the very important part. Which data structure to use? If you use XYZ data structure, it will occupy more memory. If you use ABC data structure, it will take more time. So how do you optimize that? What's the trade-off that you're thinking? And what are the assumptions you're making? And second part, the constraints, right? People usually forget in interviews that it varies from 10 days to the power 9. So will it go to N square or not? It will fail in all the test cases, right? You have to solve in O and L log, and depending upon it's 1 second or 2 seconds per test case. So all these approach are things that we are trying to see when we are interviewing for any role, not even just for SD1, for SD2 as well. So that is most important. That is something you gain out of competitive programming. That's one advantage.
absolutely. A lot of our students who are watching this, they come exactly from the backgrounds that we're talking about, like tier 3, tier 2, tier 4 colleges, right? Some of them are probably in their second year, third year, or fourth year, and they have some knowledge of programming. right? They've probably
Okay.
done some sort of, they know a little bit of loops, arrays, enough to crack, let's say, a services company, enough to like
Okay.
print, basic patterns, the sum of an array and so on. So they know their way around the language a little bit, right?
Okay.
Now, for someone like that, okay, first of all, like I'll put in like 2-3 questions. Number one, is it even possible to crack product-based company? One. Two, I am scared. Like as a student, I am scared. Even if you say yes, that it's possible, I am scared. How do I not be scared and actually prepare well for these companies? Okay. So I'll start with that, and then from that student perspective, I'll ask you a couple more questions. But we'll just start with those two things at least.
Okay. So coming to the first question, is it possible? Yes, it is possible. 100% it is possible. Second question, you are scared. How do you start with it? See, if you're scared of programming, I would say one thing: you are not learning it right. So if you're scared of programming, you are not learning it right, or maybe you're learning from somebody who is not teaching you right. That's the only two reasons, right? Programming is like mathematics. Everything that is truth, it is being shown by a compiler. To be very honest, it's that simple as that, right? So if you are even good with the loops and everything basic things, right, what you need to now excel to is the kind of data structure you need to solve a problem and what is the underlying algorithm. And let me be very honest, the way I teach, I never teach it like, okay, this is a problem of DB and this is how we solve. No, that's the worst thing. What I think is, I always tell them my students read the question twice. I forces them to understand the underlying words, words like maximum, minimum, count. Is it possible or not? Is it a backtracking question or is it a DP question? So I don't say anything. I just keep quiet. I ask them, okay, which question is this? I let them figure out. I force them to think, okay, this is a DP question and why it is a DP question. Or is it a backtracking question? Why it is a backtracking question? So once you understand the DS and algo in this way, what I do in the class is I just follow for three factors: what, why, and how. What is the data structure algorithm? What problems does it solve? Why it was required? Since we already have other data structures and algorithms, right? Why it was required in the first place? And second, how it is implemented. If you're clear with these three questions, what, why, and how, I don't think you will face any problem in any kind of the problems. You will be good with all DS and algo. Just follow these three questions. Anytime you read anything new, follow these three steps. I think it will be very easy. And that's the way I teach, and that's the way students learn to teach. I have understood, like the feedback that I have got, they actually enjoy it and they're able to solve the question. So after a certain stage, you reach at a stage, you don't need to go to the entire question, right? You read the question, you understand, okay, this is the algorithm and this is the data structure I need to solve. Once you reach up to that stage with the clear knowledge of DS and algo, I think that's sufficient for you. And when you reach that stage, you are capable enough to think the product wisdom.
That's awesome. We'll touch a little bit briefly also upon, okay, let's say we find a great mentor and I commit, but one of the major things is the commitment also, right? You can't just expect that I'll just practice for 2 months and I'll be ready, right? It's a day in, day out commitment. You at this stage are still doing competitive programming from your hobby perspective, but even if you apply to a company, that's still one of the first questions that they're going to ask, right? So commitment is one of those things. But also apart from this, like you also interview candidates and other people who interview candidates. This DS algo probably forms the biggest part, because after the first round you can't, like the first round is the DS algo. So if you don't clear the first round, you can't go to the next round. But next round onwards, problem solving is one thing you mentioned. What are some other things, characteristics that companies look at?
Other things I would say is, for a fresher role, we mostly look at the projects they're kind of like. Now, when I say projects, I do not expect to create a very hi-fi project and then you know nothing about it. For example, if somebody comes to me and say, okay, I have designed Amazon, right? And Amazon is actually a very large distributed microservices, right? They have microservices for ordering, they have microservices for transaction, they have microservices for cart adding, they have microservices for address storage. Everything is a different microservice architecture, right? And if somebody with almost no years of experience can tell me that, okay, I have created Amazon or a clone of Amazon, first of all, that amazes me. Like, how, man, I cannot make it, right? Because there's so many microservices involved. It takes a lot of time. The developers who built Amazon, right, they took at least 3 years to develop it to the production level. So if you come with this, okay, I made it in 1 month or 10 days, first of all, that will amaze me. And second, if I ask a simple question, okay, let's say I give you an example. Let's say 2 people order simultaneously and there's a flash sale going on. So how will you make sure that the first person who has entered, they have entered? And if you're not able to solve that question, or if you're not able to think through it, now that is something that will create a negative impression. So don't expect that you will create a very hi-fi project or a clone of a very popular app and you will get selected. No, that's not what we're looking for. Even if you make a very simple project, like something like, okay, in Python, you can make like some automation project for financial transaction detection or credit card fraud detection, something like this. But you're crystal clear with why you choose particular algorithm, which is the efficiency. And if you have to improve that model, what you can do in dataset and what other algorithm you can design. If you're clear with the core concepts, similarly goes for all the Java-based algorithms like Spring Boot or Hibernate. whatever domain you are into, be it an Android project, be it a web project, be it a machine learning project, anything, right? It's not need to be very hi-fi or popular. It needs to be very clear, because the first thing that we generally look for is what is the design for it, what are the class diagram, what are the activities diagram, what is the use cases that it is solving, and second part is the optimization. Suppose you build data efficiency is 80 to 85%. Now I ask you, okay, if you have to increase it to 90%, what changes will you do? That's the thing we are looking for, and that's actually brings out the problem solving. So that's the one thing about the projects. And second thing we always look about is the attitude to learn, right? Because you are at a very junior age and you are something can be molded into something, right? So trainability is extremely important. If you are rigid at this stage, it will become really difficult for in the coming years for your life, right? So that's something we always focus on and we discuss about it. Like, are you trainable? Are you able to adapt? Are you able to think about it? Because of course, in a software engineering, there are multiple ways to solve a problem. How do you choose a problem? Do you expect others' opinion or not? That is something also very important to be a part of a good team player. So it's not just your technical skills that are being tested. It's also your analytical skills, behavioral skills, problem solving skills, team player skills that is being tested. And third and last but not the least is about your communication. You have to be a two-way communication. Don't expect interview to be a kind of an interrogation. Interview is not an interrogation. Like other person is asking, you are not saying something. Interview is like a one-on-one conversation. How well you are able to put up your ideas. Whenever you are solving a question, make sure you're thinking out loud. You're telling the interviewer, okay, this is my approach and this is. And when you're going wrong, as an interviewer, they will always try to course correct you. Right? They do a course correction. Are you able to grasp that hint? That is also very important, right? Sometimes people get so nervous, sometimes people get so deep involved themselves that you're telling them the right answer, but they are not able to listen out and not able to grasp the hint. So I think these 3 or 4 factors are extremely important apart from just DS and M. So that's something really crucial.
Absolutely amazing. Yeah, I think those are some of the questions we had and the students had asked. Any last things you'd want to tell, just a word of advice to students, be it they're your current students or be it students who are just maybe they don't even join Edist. First it's about the student, and then whether they join Edist or not is a different story. So to all the aspiring students out there who are planning to get into a product based company, like any last words of advice apart from what you've said so far?
2 advice I would like to give. First is very, very important, find a good mentor. Doesn't matter you join me or join Edist or some other platform, anything you want to join it. But find a good mentor who teaches you to solve the problems, not to solve the questions. I'm repeating it again. Who teaches you to think about the problems, way of approaching it, and then solving it instead of giving you the solutions. Okay, this is the problem, this is the code plan. No, that will make you the worst developer. Even if you get into a product-based company, either you will not get promoted, you will stuck there, or you will be fired somehow. Things will turn out to be worse, right? If you're not good at problem solving. So first thing is find a good mentor who teaches you how to approach a problem. Right? That's the first thing. And second thing is that what I see right now, and I always advise my juniors as well, do not focus on money at this right. You will find people, okay, XYZ offers this much package, ABC offers this much package, let's go for the XYZ. That is the worst case to choose. The best way to choose is identify the problem space which this company is solving. Every company is unique in their problem space. I repeat, even if you see the market leaders, right, in terms of their strategy, they are very, very unique and they are very, very precise with the market strategy. Try to understand that problem space. If you're going for fintech, understand the inside out of fintech. If you're going for investment banking, understand the inside out of investment banking. If you're going for security, networking, food tech, anything, right, ed tech or the food journeys or whatever. So understand the problems that they are solving. I think that will make you a leader in that industry, right? Because joining an organization and not understanding the kind of problems you are solving or the kind of impact that you're creating is as good as not joining that organization, to be very honest. So understand the problem space, and there's a 3 idiots dialogue. Skills ke piche bhag, paisa khud tere paas aake aayega. So go after the skills, go after the things that you're good at solving. Company will reach out to you. Company will recruiters will find it anyhow, right? If you're good at your thing, recruiters will find you anyhow. So don't focus on about the money, focus on the kind of problems you are solving. And I'm sure you will get mapped to the right organization.
Brilliant. So yeah, thanks so much for those things, Devang. Before you leave, as I mentioned, we have a very quick 3-question rapid fire round, just so that people come to know that apart from coding also you have some hobbies and things like that. So if you're ready, we'll start now.
Sure.
Okay. So first things first is your favorite hobby or pastime activity?
Reading books.
Reading books? Okay, which gets me to the second question. What's your favorite book? Or if you want, you can recommend as many books as possible. Up to you.
Okay, I will recommend 2 or 3 books since it is a right short fire. Okay, first is Ikigai. It's based upon a Japanese proverb. And second is The Alchemist. And the third one that I'm reading is The Atomic Habits.
All right, nice. Who's your role model?
That's actually a very tough question. Well, you can see at the background there is Steve Jobs, right? But there are a lot of people who have inspired my journey. There are a lot of people I take inspiration from. Be it like sports player, be it like entrepreneurs, be it something like. So there are actually many people. I won't say any one person for sure, but there are many people who have impacted me. I've taken inspiration from them every day. So just I have to summarize two, three or four people. It will be first is Sachin Tendulkar, then I have Lionel Messi, Elon Musk, Steve Jobs.
Awesome, awesome. Nice list. What's your favorite dish to eat?
That's the toughest question. I eat everything I get. But yeah, I love pasta for sure. Cheese pasta.
Okay, nice. And favorite movie?
I'm not into movies actually. So depending upon genres, I have favorite movies. But
Or
one movie
TV
I
shows
really,
also. Anything is fine.
I'm not very good at TV shows. But yeah, there's web series that I like. That is Suits. So the character
Suits.
Harvey Specter, that is really something that I relate to.
Nice, awesome. So those were the questions I had. All the students here, apart from the link to our upcoming data structures and algos bootcamp, where you'll get Devang and me as your instructors. So we'll definitely put that link in the description below. We'll also put the link to all of the books and the movies that Devang has mentioned. So if nothing, you at least got a good set of book and movie recommendations as well. Right. So thanks a lot, Devang, for joining this one. It's been an absolute pleasure. It continues to be a pleasure to work with you to teach. It's amazing. And yeah, hoping to guide many more students to their product-based companies, their dream companies going forward. Thanks a lot.
Sure. Thanks, Alim. Thanks for inviting me. And all the best for the juniors who are watching it.